So today I'll talk a little bit about fungi in the restoration initiative in Auroville and how they're the hidden partners in this reforestation. So I'm Mila, and I grew up in Auroville, and then later I studied environmental studies abroad and came back to Auroville to kind of focus on learning more about botany, specifically the ecology that we live in here, and fungi. And then, so I'll go into my background, then introduction to fungi, a bit about Auroville's restoration, but Noe kind of covered a lot of it already, so you should have gotten quite a good picture of that already. And then what I'll mostly be doing throughout this presentation is looking at fungi's role throughout the restoration in each stage of it. And then I'll just link it up to the situation in Auroville today and how important it is to focus on conservation for fungi. So I got introduced to mushrooms and fungi in 2023, when I decided to create a project to document the mushrooms of Auroville. This was kind of came out of this gap of research where I felt like there wasn't barely any research in this kind of ecosystem on the fungal diversity, essentially. Before I get into that, I just want to clarify what a mushroom is and what a fungus is, because I think to some people that's not super clear. So I'll just go into that. So a mushroom is essentially the fruit of a fungus. So it's a reproductive organ, similar to like a mango for a tree. The mushroom is the fruiting body of a fungus. And fungus's main structure is this network of mycelium, which is these strands that come together and, like I said, make this kind of network. And that's how fungi usually live. That's their usual form. And this is a picture of please share if you have a document on the mushrooms of Auroville. I will share that at the end of the presentation. So this is a picture of fungi when you see it kind of aggregating, when you see it coming together in like a lot of different like a lot of mycelium coming together. Otherwise, most of the time it's invisible and it's in the soil, it's in the leaves, it's hidden, but it's always there. So the study that I did entailed me walking around the forest a lot. It entailed me observing the change, the transitions of our forests, and the way that fungi took part in these transitions. I had to do transect walks in several forests that I chose. And so I consistently see the different mushrooms that would come up, their associations, their relationships, the changes that they enabled in the environment around. And I also had to do microscope work on the mushrooms to identify them. So this is a picture of one of the mushrooms under the microscope. It's just pink because there's dye in it. That's not the color of the fungus. And we found a lot of mushrooms. There were over 300 species. And this was just in a study that was a year long, but the surveying period was half a year or a few months. And we found that there was a lot of different mushrooms. Not all fungi produce mushrooms, so they can reproduce in other ways. They don't have to produce mushrooms. So that just shows that we saw a fraction of the fungi that are there. We also found a new species. The paper has just been submitted, so hopefully it'll be out soon. And this is a really big, beautiful mushroom that hasn't been documented yet, and we named it after Auroville. So it's called Auroville, Agaricus aurovillensis. So we saw a lot of different mushrooms and a new species. So we saw lots of like high species diversity, but we saw also quite a lot of functional diversity. That means that the fungi were kind of occupying these different niches and providing different roles in the forest, in the ecology of the forest. Fungi are everywhere. So I just want to highlight this. They are like everywhere. They're in our body, they're in leaves, they're in trees, they're like in everything on different scales. But because I was studying mushrooms, I was looking at three main categories. These are the saprobes, saprobic fungi, which are the decomposers, which most people know fungi to be. These break down dead organic matter, so mostly wood and other kind of things like that. Then you have the parasitic fungi, um, which live off living things. That can be an insect. We found entomopathogenic fungi, so those live off and kill insects, as well as a lot of plant pathogens. And mutualistic fungi. I'm just going to elaborate on one type of mutualistic fungi, which is quite important. So, because it will come back later. So, mutualistic fungi, mutualist symbionts, are fungi that have an association with another organism. Mycorrhizal fungi are one of these kind of mutualistic fungi. And so myco means fungi, and rhiza means root. So these fungi are associated with tree roots. And essentially, they are better than roots at getting nutrients from the soil and water. So they essentially go out and get this nutrients and water and exchange it for sugars that the tree is creating. There are two types, and I'm going to bring them up later. So just if you can make note of them, there's the endomycorrhizal fungi, and these associate with 90% of trees. So most trees have this fungi associated with it. They do not produce mushrooms, but they're everywhere and they're really important to the trees. There are also ectomycorrhizal fungi. So these are fungi that do produce mushrooms, and they associate with like 20% or so of the trees, but they are not so common in the tropics. So you see them more, we don't have many ectomycorrhizal fungi that are native to here. So fungi are clearly pretty important to the ecosystem. They have all these different roles that are really important to forests, for forests to grow. And we've already heard a little bit about the really important practices that have gone into this restoration, the reforestation of Auroville. But I think what we haven't really heard are the other partners, are the other actors in this reforestation. So these silent partners. And I'm going to look at fungi as the ones that I think deserve the attention right now. So as Noe was showing you, the transition of this ecosystem has been really impressive. You can see before and now how different it looks. And he was telling you also, let's go back. So there were like several different categories of what, I'm just making it very simple, but essentially people tried planting here. Then they realized that they needed to manage the water because the runoff from the monsoons just stripped the soils of all the nutrients as well as the seeds and saplings. So they did bunding and other water management. And then, oh my God, and then they planted pioneer species. So these are the ones that could survive in these extreme conditions, such as the Acacia auriculaformis that Noe had mentioned. Oh, sorry, spazzing out. And then they planted the native trees, the tropical dry evergreen trees, at least the ones that they thought in this ecosystem were best adapted, were here for long, seem to have been in these sacred groves. When we talk about fungi it's worth knowing that a lot of fungi do require water. They do require to have that moisture. So when we started doing like this water management, we started seeing this increase in fungi because there was a habitat that was beneficial for it. They had the water they needed to grow and to fruit. The body of the mushroom is majority water. So this water conservation in a way was really important for the conditions that allowed fungi to survive. But fungi also helped improve the situation with water. Mycelium, so the body of the fungus, could grow because there was more water available. And in the mycelium, water was being held, so moisture was held in the mycelium itself. But also, as the mycelium wove through the soil, all this moisture no longer ran off the surface, but was able to penetrate and filter into the ground. Another important part in this conservation of water, essentially by fungi, is The endomycorrhizal fungi that I was mentioning earlier, they produce this protein called glomalin, and it essentially is like a glue, and it pulls all these soil particles together, and suddenly they're bigger pieces of soil, and all this water can filter between. And so as the soil aggregates, there's more water filtration. So in the end, what happened was that the water table also got recharged through this through the mycelium growth. Then we started planting, and there was shade, which was beneficial for a lot of the fungi that were more sensitive to the extreme heat. And there was food. So most fungi, like I was saying earlier, are decomposers. And as the leaf litter accumulated, there was suddenly food that these fungi could eat and live and survive from. And then the pioneer species were another important point in which you can see this interaction between the fungus and the flora that were brought in. So this is an Acacia auriculaformis, and this is one of their partners. So this is a Pisolethus. It's a type of ectomycorrhizal fungi. So it's not a native tree, and this fungus is also likely to come from Australia with it. And these partners, I think most people don't know about. I took this photo in a canyon that my grandfather had reforested. So we were walking down it, and I think most people don't realize that fungi are so intertwined with the trees. So if you see this, if you spot this, I don't think most people wouldn't realize the value that it's bringing. So this ectomycorrhizal fungi, it brings water and nutrients for this tree. It helps it survive the extreme weather. So back in the day, there was really little moisture, there was little soil nutrients. It was quite degraded in a way. But this fungi helped it cope with these conditions. These are some other pictures of ectomycorrhizal fungi that we see here in Auroville. So the utmost left one is an Amanita, which is the same family as the magic mushroom. So it's a poisonous one. It's not a psychedelic one, but this is a poisonous one, and it's a ectomycorrhizal species that also seems to be associated with the acacia, as maybe as well as other trees as well. And so what happened is the landscape transitioned, and there became more shade now with the other more tropical dry evergreen forest trees growing. And these pioneer species were no longer adaptable, they were no longer competitive as they were in the past. And so they were weakened. They're more likely to prone to disease and whatnot. And this is where you see fungus coming in as well. This picture, you see Ganoderma, which is an opportunistic parasite. And what it does is it parasitizes on weakened trees already, and then it kills them, and then it will like eat the dead organic matter as well. And you see a lot of these on the pioneer species. So you see fungi kind of coming in different roles and different places throughout this transition of the forest as well. So when the tropical dry evergreen forest was kind of declared in a way, and the foresters went to the sacred groves and collected the specimens of trees that were adapted to this ecosystem, to the intense summers, to the monsoons. They came with local fungi. So there were the saprobic fungi, the decomposers, as well as the endomycorrhizal fungi. And these fungi came with the saplings from the nurseries. They came in the seeds of the trees themselves, and they floated in from afar on little spores, in little spores. Spores are essentially akin to seeds, so they're what comes out of the mushroom, and that's where the genetic material is in. And that's so these spores are so tiny, so they can travel really long distances. And so we slowly start seeing more and more of these fungi here. The endomycorrhizal fungi, so just a reminder, these are the symbiotic fungi that form associations with a lot of the native trees. They do not produce mushrooms, but they're super important. They help with water absorption. So they help like moving through droughts as well as the intense monsoons. They help with nutrient uptake, carbon sequestration. Also, a lot of the carbon in our soils is within the mycelium, within the fungus in our soils. They help when young trees like need support and need to survive. They help protect against pathogens. And like I said earlier, they help aggregate the soil with this protein called glomalin. So we have these endomycorrhizal fungi and these decomposer fungi. And these decomposer fungi are really, really important. The ones that we have here, we see there's an increasing diversity because there's such a floral diversity. There's so many different types of trees, and these fungi have adapted to the niches that have been created within this ecosystem. And they break down the wood and the leaf litter and break down substances that are extremely hard for most things in nature. Lignin, which is within trees, is one of the more tough substances to break down. And they take all this nutrients and carbon that's stored within this matter, and they make it accessible in the soil. They make it accessible to other trees as well as to microbes and other organisms. This creates soil, this creates humus. And another thing as well is they break down minerals and make them accessible. And like I said earlier, they store carbon. But the main point is they create our soils. And you can see now compared to when Auroville was first, I guess, grown, the soils are completely different. The red laterite soil, hard laterite soil is in the forests is not really there anymore. Now we have this layer of topsoil. Fungi are also really important for food and habitats, and they provide really important interactions. So this picture on the left is a picture of a Termitomyces mushroom, which is a lovely edible mushroom that we find here that's actually cultivated by termites. And termites are really common here. So you see this mushroom a lot. And these termites have been cultivating this since before we began agriculture, definitely. So they're pioneers in agriculture, and they essentially what happens is they give the fungus the wood and leaf litter, and the fungus breaks it
அப்ப
down,
நாங்க
and they
சொன்னேன் இல்லை ஆல்ரெடி ரெண்டு நாள்
sustainably
வந்துட்டு ஐ மீன்
consume the fungal body. You also have like insects and other animals and things eating the mushrooms as well as the mycelium. This is a picture of a millipede eating a mushroom. They get there pretty fast, but boars are my main competitors in the forest. They usually scour for all the big, beautiful mushrooms before I can take pictures of them. So yeah, we have all these interactions that are beyond just the trees. And I think, again, this realizing that a forest is more than its trees, you know? So how do people support fungi? And specifically, how do we support fungi? So we've provided shade, we've managed the water, we've provided mulch. That's all helped them survive, and it like created a habitat for them. But we haven't, for example, brought mycelium from other sites. So Noe was talking about reference sites. So these sacred groves, for example, we haven't transferred the soil with the fungus in it, or have this mycorrhizal inoculants, which is essentially the mycorrhiza brought there. We have planted in a way that could support it by planting these nitrogen fixers, so there's more nutrients for the fungus, or ground cover, which helps support the shade, and these mycorrhizal partner trees we've planted. But we still lack the research on this type of ecosystem and the fungal relationship with this ecosystem. So that's something that we really need to look at, and especially, again, compared to this ideal kind of there's never an ideal forest, but this forest that we perceive it kind of transforming more into um, what exists there. And to an extent, we've protected the habitat for quite a while, allowing the species to thrive. And that's created this diversity in the fungal world, which is very clear. I think when I talk to people who were here at the beginning, they've seen like five different types of mushrooms, and now we see hundreds. And I keep having people come up to me and be like, "Wow, I just keep seeing so many more mushrooms." And so there's been an increase in the number of mushrooms, but also the number of species. And that's because there's a habitat. So then there's more decomposers and there's better soil. And then that is the foundation for a functional ecosystem. But soil is slow. It takes a long time to build soil. It takes years to break down one log, and it takes minutes to destroy a habitat. Um, I often have people ask me, but aren't fungi like so associated with death? Um, and in a way, that's kind of true. Like after the mass extinctions, you see this spike in fungi. Um, but at the same time, there's so many different types of fungi. Like we were talking about earlier, not all are the decomposers who would be happy with extra wood. And it also depends what you're doing with all this. What are you doing with the landscape? What are you doing with the habitat? And I think we've noticed in Auroville over the last few years, there's been a lot of destruction. And what happened with the ecosystem is, I guess the question to ask is what's happening with the wood? The wood's not being left in the forest for the fungi. What's happening to the land? The land's being covered by concrete, creating a habitat that's just inhabitable to to these organisms, at least a majority of them. Some are very adapted, but we want a diversity. We want to create a space where it's not just one very adapted fungus that can survive. One of the sites that I was surveying was actually cleared during the time that I was surveying it for a road. The road hadn't been built yet, and it took some time, I guess. And so you could see actually what fungi did is they started to transform the land into, again, a space of richness. And that kind of illustrated to me that fungi are extremely resilient, and they create resilience in an ecosystem. But I think it's really important to kind of bring back to the fact that it takes a really long time to build an ecosystem. It takes a long time to build soils. It takes a long time to aggregate all of this diversity in one space. And it took 50 years for us to see this diversity that we're seeing now. And it can be taken away really fast. And we need a system that supports this kind of life, not destroys the habitats and destroys the livelihoods that are there to protect it. The protection of Auroville's fungi and hence its habitats is really important because this kind of ecosystem is really rare. We don't find it in a lot of places. There are a few spaces, specifically the sacred groves, but these are small areas that you see this kind of ecosystem. And so it's really important, but we barely know anything about it, especially in the fungal world. Like in this short time that I was surveying, we found a new species, and fungi is really generally undiscovered. But there's so many hidden gems, and we do not know who they are and their relationships. And Auroville is this living sanctuary. It is a living reserve for species and a seed bank, but it's also a sanctuary for these native fungi. And that's just really important to kind of re-establish. So I something that I often think about is what is a forest? And I think a lot of people, and myself included, sometimes perceive a forest as its trees. Um, but fungi are the forest. Fungi were actually there before forests. They were essentially the original roots of trees. They were the roots before trees had roots, you know? And so fungi are like critical to forests. Fungi are part of forests, you know? And they are these cornerstone organisms, and there would be no reforestation without them. Um, yeah, so they're essential. There would be no forest without fungi. So they support trees, they create soils, they cycle nutrients and water, they provide habitats and food. And yeah, essentially, they are really important to our ecosystems. And I think, I guess, although my research was really to look at who is there, trying to understand the species of mushroom that are there, what really I wanted to bring to this conversation is that they, firstly, they're very abundant and they're really cool, but they're often not seen. And they're so important. They're so important to transforming the landscapes into places that are diverse and can host so many other organisms. And I hope next time you go walking about, you are just have a little bit more curiosity for fungi and just eyes open for the mushrooms. Um, yeah, so I think that's kind of where I'm going to end, and then we'll start taking questions from for Noe and my presentation, so both of the presentations. I'm just leaving you with this, which is just some resources, the article that Noe had talked about, as well as a documentary on this type of ecosystem here and how it's transformed. My Instagram, where I talk a bit about the fungi as well here. And I can share, if people would like, on email later, um, um, I guess a report for the community that I wrote on the fungi of Auroville as well. Yeah, so that's it for me. I'll stop sharing.